Love grows with comfort. But desire grows with distance. Just pause and think about that for a second.
It's quite the paradox, isn't it?
It really is. It's a completely fascinating, almost cruel paradox. Because the closer you get to someone, the more you build a shared life with them, the more the spark just seems to naturally, inevitably fade.
Yeah, that happens to so many people.
And here is the second, even bigger mind bender for you listening right now. You aren't actually attracted to people.
Right.
You are attracted to parts of yourself that you haven't met yet.
Which is wild to think about. I mean, we treat attraction like it's gravity.
Yeah.
Like this unavoidable external force just pulling us towards someone else's objective traits.
Right, like they're just objectively good looking or funny.
Exactly. But it is actually more like a highly complex lock and key mechanism. We are walking around with a very specific, often hidden emotional lock, just scanning the room for the person who perfectly fits our unresolved internal damage or, missing pieces.
Wow. Well, welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to really unpack the hidden psychology of sex, attraction, and desire. We are tossing out the surface-level magazine dating advice to dig into the actual human truth here.
Oh, absolutely. We need to.
Yeah, because we are going to explore why relationships fundamentally change, why that initial fire dims, and most importantly, how we can practically bring it back. To do that, we have some incredible sources we're diving into. We're looking at the psychoanalytic theories of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, modern neurobiology and dopamine science, and all the way back to ancient Taoist philosophy.
It's a really layered approach, but it paints a breathtakingly clear picture. By the end of this discussion, you'll understand the literal mechanics of why desire fades while you're magnetically drawn to very specific types of people and the actionable blueprint to reclaim that energy.
So let's start with the painful truth, because I think it's universally relatable. In the beginning of a relationship, everything feels absolutely electric. You text all night, you're thinking about them constantly. Every little quirk they have is charming. I mean, even their flaws feel kind of cute and endearing, right?
They do. They really do.
But then slowly something shifts. The good morning texts with the heart emojis get replaced by texts that say, like, hey, did you pay the electricity bill? Or, what's the Wi-Fi password again?
Right. Romance didn't die. It just got quietly replaced by household logistics.
Exactly. And we culturally view this shift as a failure. Couples panic. They think the loss of the spark means something is inherently wrong with the relationship.
Yeah, but if we look at the insights of Sigmund Freud, he actually argued that desire is fundamentally fueled by tension, by mystery, and by the unknown. You simply cannot desire what you already fully possess.
Okay, wait, unpack that a bit.
Well, as a relationship matures, it is practically designed to move toward predictability, routine, and emotional safety.
Which is the goal, isn't it? I mean, that makes perfect sense for physical and emotional safety. But mentally, doesn't that predictability breed a sort of mundane contempt?
It breeds profound comfort. And comfort is the absolute bedrock of long-term attachment and trust. But, and this is the core problem Freud highlights, that same safety is absolutely deadly for desire.
Deadly.
Yeah. Too much familiarity kills erotic energy. When you fully know someone, your brain literally stops exploring them. Desire, by its very definition, requires a gap to cross. It needs space.
I want to look at the neurobiology of this because it isn't just an abstract Freudian concept, right? Your brain runs on dopamine, and dopamine isn't just the feel-good chemical, it's the molecule of anticipation.
Exactly. The anticipation is key.
Right. It spikes when something is new, unpredictable, or slightly out of reach. But long-term relationships systematically remove all three of those triggers. You build a routine, you learn their habits, you live together. So your brain surveys the living room on a Tuesday night and essentially says, well, nothing new here, no need to release dopamine.
Let's look at the actual mechanism of how that happens because it's fascinating. The human brain is, above all else, an energy conservation machine. So when an environment becomes totally predictable, the brain physically downregulates its dopamine receptors for that specific environment just to save metabolic energy. It's a process called sensory adaptation.
Like getting used to a smell.
Exactly. Think about walking into a house that smells like fresh coffee. For the first 5 minutes, the smell is intoxicating.
Oh, I love that smell.
Right. But after 20 minutes, your brain stops registering it completely. You don't smell it anymore. The same neurological pruning happens with your partner. Your brain stops dedicating resources to noticing them because it has already mapped them. The reward has been acquired. The hunt is over.
Okay, so it's like exploring a new city versus walking your daily commute. Once you know every street corner, you just stop looking around.
That's a perfect analogy.
So let's unpack this. If the daily commute is the problem, if walking the same predictable path every day puts the brain to sleep, does that mean a stable, emotionally safe relationship is just biologically doomed to be boring?
No, not at all. We don't need to live in chaos to keep desire alive. Instead, we have to deliberately hack our routines. Forced chaos is exhausting, and it destroys the safety you need for love.
Right. Nobody wants to plan wild, exhausting date nights every single week just to manufacture sparks.
Exactly. We don't need wild instability. We need to deliberately reintroduce polarity in space. The antidote is maintaining a boundary of mystery.
So step one, stop being completely predictable.
Yes, you don't have to share every single thought in your head the moment you have it. You need to let curiosity exist. Remember, familiarity builds comfort, but mystery builds attraction. You have to hold those two opposing truths simultaneously.
I feel like pop culture totally lies to us about this.
Oh, all the time.
Yeah, because society tells us we should basically lose ourselves in a relationship and become one. You know, the whole Jerry Maguire, you complete me trope.
It is a terrible cliche.
Right. But when you merge, your brain's novelty detection system shuts down. If your partner is just an extension of you, they aren't novel anymore. Attraction doesn't grow in the overlap. It grows in the space between you.
That is the fatal error of the modern romantic comedy narrative. Attraction thrives when your partner sees you as a separate, independently evolving person. They need to look across the room and see you entirely engaged in your own world, operating in your own element. They need to think, wow, that person is deeply interesting and capable. Not just, that person is mine.
Okay, I have a friend who experienced this exact phenomenon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so she and her husband had been in a rut for years. They were totally just roommates. Then she decided to train for a marathon. She was getting up early, joining running groups, pushing her physical limits, and her husband would go to these races and watch her cross the finish line alongside hundreds of strangers.
Oh, I bet that shifted things.
It completely shifted things. He suddenly saw her not as his wife who forgets to buy milk, but as this fiercely dedicated athlete in her own ecosystem. He was magnetized to her again, not because they went on a romantic vacation, but because she reestablished her individual identity.
What your friend achieved there was the reintroduction of emotional polarity.
Emotional polarity.
Yeah, it's the tension between stability and spontaneity, between grounding and flow. It isn't about gender, it's about dynamic energy. In the beginning of a relationship, partners usually occupy different ends of these spectrums, and that difference creates a literal magnetic pull.
But over time, they compromise.
Exactly. They synchronize their habits, their moods, their reactions. They meet in the middle and become too similar. And when that polarity disappears, the spark just flattens. You become two identical magnets pushing each other away with a sort of bland, comfortable neutrality. By stepping into her own extreme challenge, your friend created distance, which recreated the polarity.
Okay, so keeping a little distance helps maintain the fire. But that brings up a huge question.
What's that?
If merging destroys the pull, what created that heavy magnetic pull to that specific person in the first place? Out of everyone in the world, out of all the people we could potentially build a life with, why them?
To answer that, we have to look at Carl Jung.
The psychoanalyst.
Yes. And Jung had a profoundly disruptive, almost uncomfortable theory about this. He argued that we are drawn to people who carry our unconscious parts.
Wait, meaning what?
Meaning you don't actually fall in love with someone else. You fall in love with a reflection of your own hidden self.
Oh, wow. So if you're listening to this right now and thinking about your own ex who absolutely drove you crazy, ask yourself, what specific trait of theirs did you initially find irresistible? Because according to Jung, that trait is actually hiding inside you.
Jung called this the shadow. The shadow consists of all the parts of your personality that you suppressed, ignored, or were taught to be ashamed of during your childhood development.
Like what kind of traits?
Well, maybe you grew up in a household where anger was punished, so you aggressively pushed down your assertiveness and learned to be highly agreeable. Or maybe you were told to be practical and serious, so you buried your artistic, spontaneous, silly side. But those traits don't just evaporate.
Right, they have to go somewhere.
They get exiled to the unconscious. And because you aren't living them out yourself, you are powerfully, magnetically drawn to people who openly embody them.
So if I am an incredibly quiet, reserved, highly structured person who lives by the rules, I might walk into a party and be instantly captivated by someone who is bold, loud, expressive, and maybe a little chaotic.
Exactly.
Because they're living out my shadow. I'm drawn to them because they represent the freedom that I have locked away inside myself.
Precisely. It's the mechanism of projection. And it explains the intensity of that initial chemistry. Your brain is constantly scanning the environment for familiar emotional signatures. When it spots a repressed trait like that loud, chaotic freedom in a stranger, it registers a profound sense of recognition.
And then it just floods you with chemicals.
It floods your nervous system with infatuation chemicals. This is a biological imperative. Your psyche is literally trying to reclaim that lost part of yourself by forcing a bond with the person who carries it. For a while, it feels magical. You feel whole around them because psychologically you finally have access to your missing pieces.
But the shadow is a trap. I can totally see where this is going. The very thing that draws you in becomes the thing that breaks you apart, right?
It is the tragic irony of the Jungian mirror. The exact traits that attract you so intensely at the beginning are virtually guaranteed to be the traits that eventually annoy you the most.
Oh, that's so true. In the attraction phase, you're telling your friends, oh, they're just so mysterious and free-spirited. They don't care about the rules. It's so refreshing.
Right.
But cut to 2 years later in the reality phase, and you're screaming at them because they are completely irresponsible. They haven't done their taxes in 3 years, and they never reply to your text messages.
Exactly. Such a common flip.
Why does that flip happen so predictably, though? Why does the magic turn into such intense frustration?
Because the shadow represents traits you originally judged as unsafe or unacceptable to your core identity. At first, it's a thrilling vacation to be near that energy, but eventually, your ego remembers why it locked those traits away in the first place.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the chaotic, expressive person starts to feel deeply threatening to your disciplined, structured world. So what do? You start trying to change them. You try to civilize them. You try to make them more like you.
Which, ironically, if you actually succeeded, would destroy the polarity and kill the attraction anyway.
Exactly. You're back to square one with zero desire.
That is devastating. If our deepest attractions are essentially just our unconscious minds playing tricks on us, forcing us to bond with our missing pieces, how do we stop this cycle? Are we just biologically destined to turn magic into annoyance?
Not if we do the psychological work of internalizing the solution. The fix starts with knowing yourself deeply, and it requires brutal honesty. You have to look at your partner or the history of the people you typically date and ask, what exact traits attract me to them? And then you have to ask the much harder, more painful question. What does that say about me? Remember, attraction is a mirror. If you always date people who are slightly broken and need to be saved, what does that say about your own need to be a savior? Or your avoidance of dealing with your own internal mess?
Wow. So instead of seeking these admired traits out in the wild and trying to capture them in a partner, the solution is to build them internally.
Yes. You integrate your shadow.
If I am always attracted to highly confident, assertive people because I secretly feel insecure and voiceless, the fix isn't to marry a confident person and hope it rubs off on me. The fix is to actually do the terrifying work of exploring my own emotiveness.
Exactly. If you admire emotional depth in others because you're totally shut down, you need to start exploring your own emotional depth. You become a more complete, psychologically whole person. And when you do that, the mechanism of projection stops hijacking your romantic choices. You stop desperately trying to find a missing puzzle piece to complete you.
Which brings us to a massive takeaway from all these sources. Conscious choice over chemistry. We are culturally conditioned to worship chemistry. If the sparks are flying, it must be destiny.
Yeah, that's what the movies say.
Right. But chemistry, as we've just unpacked, is often just your unhealed trauma or your shadow self recognizing its counterpart. Chemistry is powerful, but it is not inherently wise.
No, it really isn't.
When you develop self-awareness, you turn attraction from an unconscious trap into a conscious choice. You can observe your own reactions and say, wow, I feel a massive pull toward this person, but I recognize it's just my brain seeking out the chaos I'm used to, and I don't actually want to build a life with chaos.
And what's deeply moving about all this is how this modern neurobiology and psychoanalysis maps perfectly onto ancient philosophy.
Yeah.
If we look at Taoism, we see the concept of yin and yang. We often think of these just as static symbols, black and white circle, but they represent dynamic, interdependent opposites, light and dark, hard and soft, action and rest. The core teaching of Taoism here is that harmony does not exist in sameness. Harmony exists in the tension between opposites. Think of a guitar string. If it's too loose, there's no sound. If it's too tight, it snaps. The music is in the tension.
That completely reframes what a successful relationship looks like. It's not about two people becoming the exact same person with the exact same opinions and hobbies. It's about balancing contrasting energies.
Precisely. Too much comfort leads to stagnation. That's the downregulated dopamine, the merged identity, where couples lose all desire. But too much distance leads to disconnection, where you just become passing strangers. The ultimate art of the relationship is navigating that balance.
It's an active process.
It's a continuous, lifelong dance of pulling close for safety, intimacy, and love, and then deliberately stepping back into your own individuality to recreate the space required for desire.
This entire deep dive gives us a completely different lens to view our romantic lives. Let's really synthesize this down to the core truths we've uncovered today. First, we have to accept the fundamental paradox. Love needs safety, but desire needs space. You simply cannot cultivate both with the exact same tools.
You really can't. And practically, that means resisting the urge to be an entirely open book every single second of the day. You have to fiercely maintain your individual identity, your hobbies, your private inner world, your friendships. When you lose yourself in the relationship, you destroy the polarity. You have to remain a distinct you for them to desire you.
Exactly. And on the psychological side, attraction needs profound self-awareness. We have to ruthlessly analyze our own attraction patterns. When we feel that intense, irrational pull towards someone, we have to pause and ask what part of our own shadow is trying to make itself known. Because if we start growing, if we stop exploring our own missing pieces and just demand our partners fill the void, the relationship stops evolving.
It really does. It turns from a dynamic partnership into a hostage situation.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and that self-awareness is the critical difference between being a helpless passenger in your romantic life, just getting tossed around by chemical spikes and shadow projections, and actually being the driver.
Yeah.
When you work on developing your own shadow traits within yourself, you start choosing relationships from a place of wholeness rather than a place of lacking. You stop trying to fix your partner and start understanding your own psychology.
Which leaves us with one final, incredibly provocative thought for you to mull over as you go about your week. We established at the very beginning that love grows with comfort, but desire grows with distance.
Right.
We explored how our deepest, most passionate attractions are often just our unconscious minds trying to heal by finding our missing pieces in someone else. So what happens to desire if you actually do the work?
That's the big question.
What happens if you integrate your shadow, stop projecting, and become completely psychologically whole and healed? Do we eventually outgrow the need for that chaotic electric romance entirely? Do we evolve past the biological trap of infatuation? And if so, what does desire look like on the other side of wholeness?
That is the ultimate frontier of human connection. When you don't need someone to complete you, you are finally free to just experience them.
It really is. Something to think about the next time you feel that sudden magnetic pull toward a stranger across the room, or the next time you look at a partner you've known for years and wonder where the spark went. Remember, love grows with comfort, but desire grows with distance.